So, if you remember my videos on the Sengoku Jidai, which no one watched apparently, I mentioned a remarkably interesting character in Korean history. The greatest admiral in naval history. The man, the myth, the legend. Admiral Yi, the savior of Korea. This man revolutionized naval warfare and bet Japan, not once, but twice. But his story does not start there. The year is 1576, and Yi Sun-sin has just passed his military exam. He was sent to a border fort. Usually these forts were rife with corruption and undisciplined soldiers. But Admiral Yi whipped them into shape, so much so that when the harshest inspector in feudal Korea came to inspect Yi's base, he simply turned to him and said, "Good job." This man was known for being notoriously strict, and never left without finding a fault. That's just how good Yi was. Yi was moved back to the capital to train new cadets. Now, you see, Admiral Yi was not only dedicated, but he was also uncorruptible. This did not bode well in the capital, though, as the military academy was really just for nobles to jump the ranks, and Yi was having none of it. This probably got him kicked back to the outskirts, because of some friends in high places. And he's back to the start. Eventually, he rose through the ranks to commander of a naval base, and yet he was beaten back, or at least his enemies tried to. But he was an expert at this point at getting around these accusations, until one inspector got him fired for negligence. He was later proven innocent and welcomed back with open arms. This literally just keeps happening for 20 years. I don't know why this. Eventually, the Korean-Japanese War begins, where Yi can finally prove his worth. But first, some backstory. If any of you watched the Sengoku Jidai video, Japan had just emerged from 100 years of war, and they had a huge army that they needed to get rid of, as the economy could not afford it. Now they had two options: either fire most of the army, meaning there would be tons of skilled warriors, unhappy and out of a job. So, to war they would go. Where to invade? Maybe the arguably weakest, closest country? The tiny country Korea. It makes sense, right? Nah. Japan went after the Chinese instead. They really wanted to walk their army through Korea. Now, one of Yi's friends knew war was probably inevitable, so he made sure Yi was high enough to make a difference, until he became naval commander in 1591. And here, he really gets to work, drilling soldiers, drawing up war plans, and he even invented a new type of boat, the turtle boat. But it was too little too late. Japan rocked up, hundreds of ships appearing over the horizon flying the Japanese flag, and for some reason, the Korean government did nothing. Thinking it was a tributary for some reason. Even when troops were unloading on the beach, they just didn't do anything. By the time they realized what was going on, there was already a huge Japanese army in Korea, and they teared through the country, reaching Seoul within the month. And, of course, these idiots calling themselves generals scuttled their ships, 100 warships at the bottom of the Gulf, without even a fight. But there was still hope. Yi had begun to move with his force of 24. He rounded up other commanders to rendezvous, and managed to scavenge up to 45 warships to fight the Japanese. Now, there's one thing that makes Yi such a legend, and it's the fact that he never was a naval captain. He had never been in a naval battle before. He was a land army general, who was pushed into a naval role, and yet he was ready. First, he waited for the Japanese to raid a town. Then, when he found 50 ships docked at Okpo, he ripped into them. By the end, 26 Japanese ships were destroyed, and only one Korean had been injured. They decided to retreat, so they would not be ambushed. And it was a good thing too, as when they left, they saw 5 warships approaching, and Yi showed no mercy. Only one Japanese ship escaped that day. Then, he heard 13 more were docked not too far away, and these guys just up and dipped when they saw Yi coming. Yi was becoming infamous. But, you see, Yi was not the only factor in this war. While Yi may have been able to stave back the Japanese navy, it was too late, since most of the army had already landed on Korea, and had already captured half the country. The Korean military lost again and again on land. They abandoned choke points without a fight. The bulk of their forces were annihilated. The king had even been forced to leave his capital of Seoul to Pyongyang. At this point, Admiral Yi was really their only hope. And Yi was not wasting time. Though for 3 weeks he did not attack the Japanese, he spent them planning and waiting for his turtle boats to be made. And when he got word that the Japanese armada had docked in Sachon, he was ready. But, in the wise words of Admiral Akbar, "It's a trap!" You see, the Japanese had set up arquebusiers along the cliffs to fire down on Yi's armada once it reached port. So, Yi sent a small detachment to lure out the navy, luring them directly to the bulk of Yi's fleet, where, once again, they were decimated, but this time using the turtle boat, which had just been released. The turtle ship charged right into the middle of the fleet, decimating everyone, with cannons facing every single direction. It was a clear victory for Yi, and once again, not a single Korean ship was lost. And just to prove how cool of a guy Yi was, directly after the battle, when he consults with his captains, he simply takes off his armor and picks a bullet out of his shoulder. He had been shot in the middle of battle and had kept his cool. What a lad. And when he heard the next day that there was a raid going on in Dongpo, he rushed after the attackers. Once again, he sent his turtle ships into their midst. Once again, they destroyed them. You see, the turtle ship was somewhat unique. It had cannons facing in every direction, and it did not have an open top. It had a roof covered in spikes. There was even a dragon head at the front that could be used for obnoxious gas to be spilt out, or even fire. Yeah, they had a flamethrower on the front of their ship. So with this weapon, they could not be flanked, and they could just barge into the middle of any fleet, decimating them, shooting volley after volley. While the turtle ships were causing havoc, the rest of the Korean fleet surrounded the docked Japanese armada, and a lucky shot from one of the captains felled the Japanese commander, leading to chaos and another flawless victory. Rinse and repeat a couple of times, and you have a lot of Japanese ships sunk and a lot of supply routes unable to be filled. And when you take a look at the map, look, there's barely any Korea left. The king's literally in a border village. So the order was given. All Navy personnel were to focus on Yi. But, once again, the infighting of the Japanese feudal system got in the way. One of the admirals, with 73 ships, thought he could take Yi alone. Yi had been preparing, and now had more turtle ships, 3 times as much in fact, and had a fleet of 56. So, in the Gyeongyang Strait, a huge naval battle would be fought, one of the largest in history, and it would continue for hours. But Admiral Yi, once again, pulls a wind, using a new maneuver known as the crane wing, and by the end, 47 Japanese ships were sunk, and not a single Korean ship was lost. And after this, immediately, Yi went and cleared up the other 2 admirals, who had docked their entire armadas. So, they fell, in the bloodiest battle on Yi's part ever. Hundreds of Yi's sailors were hurt, but no ships were sunk. And finally, the Japanese armada was gone. Yi had successfully stopped Japan. But the war was not over, and Yi plans to make one final killing blow. Tune in next time to find out what Yi does to annoy Toyotomi Hideyoshi to the highest extent, and saves Korea. Be sure to like and subscribe. Also, you've got to over 100 really quickly. What? So I have to now make a Minecraft Bed Wars video. That was a joke. You weren't meant to do that. It's trickery. I know what you've done. Remember to like and subscribe. We'll see you later.